Oh, the Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, the Muad'Dib of the motherboard. What other ones could I come up with? There's so many. But here for the Sovryn Tech October live, live and in color, baby. Hangouts Q&A, and I am so excited, always excited to do these. I love doing these. At some point, I've had such a crazy schedule. I know I've been saying that like pretty much since PorkFest back in June or July, whenever the fuck that was. I've had such a crazy schedule. Things will hopefully slow down a little bit actually after next week, because I have a conference that I have to attend, and then I'll be moving on from from that, and then things will slow down a bit, and I can actually start finishing up or start releasing. Some of the stuff is finished, but start releasing a lot of the projects I've been working on with Sovryn Tech. So very exciting stuff. But first starting it off, before I get into, we actually already have somebody lined up to chat in the Hangout. But before I get to them, I got to say a thank you. And I don't know who the hell did this, but I have a Sovryn Tech Amazon wish list. I don't really have a Sovryn Tech Amazon link that you can buy stuff from, even though those are becoming problematic. Like Amazon's really starting, which I predicted like 2 years ago that was going to be a problem as soon as they announced the Echo. But anyway, that's another story for another time. But I have a wish list. For the Amazon link, I just use the Sex and Science Hour link, stuff.sexandsciencehour.com. But on my Amazon wish list, I needed like a more portable computer that I could take around with me, something that had some pretty good quality. And one of you bought this gorgeous Asus Zenfone. Yeah, I have a Zenfone, but ZenBook 3. I mean, this is a stunner. I have it here on camera. I mean, this thing is absolutely as gorgeous as anything Apple produces by a long shot. It has this gorgeous gold trim. It's all aluminum. Thing only weighs like 2 pounds. It's literally, I think it's literally the lightest notebook or laptop in the world. It is just a stunner. It has that great brushed metal look. 12 inches, 12.5 inch screen, right? Very small, but the full size keyboard, backlit keyboard, the whole thing has the Intel HD graphics 620. Wish it had an Iris chip in it, but no big deal. Gets about 9 hours of battery life, depending on things, and it has 8 gig of RAM. It's got a Core i5 in it. I mean, it is just a stunner of a machine. That's actually going to be very helpful for me when I go to this conference. But thank you so much for that. I mean, this I'm in awe touching this machine. It is one of the most, if not the most beautiful computer, not my favorite, but one of the most beautiful, or maybe the most beautiful computer I've ever touched. And it really blows away. It's probably comparable to like your MacBook, not the MacBook Pro, but just the MacBook. And it smokes a MacBook, especially as far as specs go. And it's the same deal, though, where it only has the one USB-C port on it. I'll probably do a full review on it on Sovryn Tech after I really put it through its paces. I've only had it a couple days and have still been installing software and doing all the business on it. But I like it a lot. I mean, wow, is this thing? Yeah, I mean, you forget, like, I just tossed it into my bag. I have like a workout bag and everything. I just tossed it in there, and the thing's tough as nails. Like, they put Gorilla Glass on it and everything, even though it's not touchscreen. I just toss in, you'd forget that you're carrying it. I mean, it feels almost lighter than my phone. It's insane. Just how light this thing is. I don't know if you'd want to, I mean, you'd have to connect, like adapters. You'd have to, go into dongle hell with the USB-C port on it. But as long as you're okay with that, I mean, you could get away with, I mean, this thing can do a lot. So far, I haven't run into, hell, I can even play, there's quite a few games I can play on it. It's a very, very nice machine. So anyway, thank you so much to the Sovryn Tech listener, whoever you are that bought that. That means the world to me. I am so honored, because that is not a cheap machine by any means, but that is really going to help out a lot with Sovryn Tech going into the future. Quite a bit, because if I have to travel, that way I'm not lugging around a whole ton of crap, and the lighter I can travel, the better. And there's other cases for minimalism maybe that could be made on that, but regardless, anyway, let's get into, we've got some people hanging out in the so there's people in the live chat saying, time for sovereign satanic services of the Sabbath. Oh, you better believe it, baby. And good times will be had. Shiny. Nice. I love it. So we already have somebody lined up, and I have some questions preloaded from the Facebook Uncensored group that I will get into, but we got somebody lined up with a question. We have Daniel here who attends often, which I'm really honored by. If he wants to come on board, he's welcome to start asking away. Daniel, how we doing?
Hey, doing well. Nice to be in live and color, although all I really see is black, so I don't know what what live and color actually means.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, someone said that on Twitter. They're like, you mean live and triple black? I'm like, yeah, well.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So what's on your mind?
I wouldn't know. I don't have Twitter, but you don't have to necessarily answer this right now if you don't have a sort of solidified opinion on it. But at some point, I'd like to hear your views on industrial IoT. To me, it seems like it's, there's a lot going for it in terms of like making manufacturing more efficient, for instance, or allowing predictive analytics to gauge when maintenance should be done and sort of what it should focus on, understanding supply chain better. I don't know. The more I look into it, the more it seemed to me that the issue with IoT is the retail aspect, where it invades people's lives, not so much the fact that you're in effect digitizing real-world devices. Sure. Obviously, security needs to be baked into everything that's done, if not just to make sure that these IoT sensors are, I don't know, read-only or transmission mode only and would require like physical access to modify. But anyway, wanted to know your thoughts on that, and if possible, your thoughts on a more large-scale infrastructure, industrial IoT like smart cities, which, as opposed to the previous kind, is something that I'm scared of, because this is really, it includes to a large degree, whether it's the intention or not, but it includes like tracking individuals without their express consent, and it's ripe for abuse. But anyway, either side of the spectrum of industrial IoT, curious for your thoughts.
Sure. So before I deep dive on that, I want to get out a term just in case I forget to actually talk about this. That happens to me a lot when whether I'm doing a live show or a prime show. But trash analytics, I'm just going to put that out there for starters, which is relative to what you're talking about. But anyway, the overall thing. So here, this is where, like, I to compare as an analogy with industrial IoT, which is the idea that, yeah, you're using it in manufacturing, the enterprise space and all of this. Much like Google Glass, which I had similar problems with Google Glass as I did, say, with the Internet of Things in the abstract. Google Glass, I think, is a great idea for the professional space, for the business space, for the enterprise space, whatever you want to call it. Google Glass, I mean, is just brilliant for that. In IoT, as an industrial IoT, I also think is actually brilliant for that framework, for that environment. That's the term I'm looking for that environment. I really actually, I don't have a problem with it, because a couple of the problems that IoT generally introduces would be solved just from being a part of the, of industry, of being a part of the enterprise space. And those being, first off, is that like the average IoT device that gets sold to the consumer, security, I mean, it's just not there. And longtime listeners know that, but I mean, really, like, it's just not a part of the program. As to where with, and part of the reason it's not a part of the program is because to sell it to the consumer, to get a consumer on board, even with something as simple as a toothbrush that connects to their smartphone, or whatever, it has to have an exceptionally low cost. When you get into the enterprise space, that is, low cost is not a problem. And also, most major companies that would take advantage of industrial IoT have massive security teams, or cybersecurity teams, I should say. They have whole IT departments and all of this, to where there are people keeping an eye on the price, with IoT being implemented. The other thing, too, is that within industrial IoT, within these kind of controlled environments that a business provides, the bulk of these IoT devices could be connected to the corporate VPN that they're running, that pretty much every corporation, uses a VPN of some kind. And so, again, most of they could really separate it from anything else going on in the rest of the world. Now, there's no guarantee that they would do that, but I'm way more amenable to the idea of industrial IoT, and I could see a lot of advantages, to having that be a part of it. One of them being is that, we are getting into where there's a lot of, in fact, it's not just IoT, but also blockchain technology is getting used for this. I don't think I ever got to the story. It was one that actually had quite a bit of heated debate in the Facebook group. But it was about, I think IBM was using blockchain and what is, at the end of the day, kind of IoT, in the industrial within industry to like keep track of food waste and transportation, all this stuff, and understand, like IBM has known this for a while. Back when they developed Adept, which is the name of their original blockchain idea, which kind of uses Ethereum, and maybe they've changed names by now. But anyway, this was a long time ago, and they were going to use Adept in the consumer space, not just in the industrial space. But with Adept, you're using blockchain and IoT, and blockchain's a great idea for IoT because it allows for the storage of data without needing to have, taken up a ton of server space and everything. So my point on that being is that, yeah, I can see where, like with solving food waste, that, yeah, the good things can come out of this. This could really actually work. And also the other thing I mentioned was like trash analytics. Now this leads into more of your smart cities question. But before I get into the smart cities thing, is there any comments you had or wanted to make on what I just said about industrial IoT overall, Daniel?
No, I mean, I'm glad we're on the same page, because I was also kind of, at first I was thinking to myself, oh crap, here's someone else getting into IoT. Well, but then I was kind of looking into it, and I was like, well, actually, this isn't too bad. To be perfectly honest, from what I was looking into, and I was just wondering whether I was missing something or not, and it really does seem to sort of have a good, I don't know, has a good potential, put it this way. And again, like you said, you need to have security baked into it. You otherwise, like, you're kind of missing the point. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing, again, the consumer space, the enterprise space, those are two very different things, and they offer two very different opportunities for the application of various technologies. And, most of the time, what is a terrible idea in the consumer space can actually be a great idea in the enterprise space. Like I said, even something as crazy as Google Glass is a brilliant thing to include in enterprise, because I mean, it just makes sense. You can think of all the applications that it can be used for, and it's fantastic. So okay, but now as far as the smart cities go, oh boy. So Google has been talking about smart cities for a while. IBM, which I just mentioned, they hold I think they have the Twitter name of @SmartCity or something. I mean, they've been talking about that shit for, decades, for a long time. It's never really, come to fruition, never exactly happened. Larry Page did that very, what I consider infamous, not in the positive sense, the very infamous write up for interview for the Financial Times, where he talked about how, Google's eventually, we're going to be making cities, full on cities, and everything's going to be, on track, blah, blah, blah. And I think I covered this on Sovryn Tech at the time. Maybe I didn't have enough time to get into it or whatever. But yeah, IoT getting used in a more smart city sense, which would include something like, and this is a field that this is very, very new field for the tech world and industry in general, and that is what's called trash analytics. And the idea is that if you put a bunch of IoT devices into dumpsters, the amount of information that you can collect about, not just groups of people that say put their trash in that dumpster, but also, I mean, just individuals and everything, it's considered right now. Literally, there are people who are speculating that trash analytics, due to IoT, is a literal $1 trillion industry just waiting to happen. And, there's companies that are working on it and trying to make it go down. Now, the privacy implications and so much more about this are terrifying, and that's just one example of what could happen within a smart city. I think a great story for people to read. It's actually a classic story. It's one of the most translated short stories, science fiction short stories in the world. But it's from the 60s, I think, or maybe the 70s. Anyway, it's called Repent Harlequin, Said the TikTok Man, by Harlan Ellison, where it's talking about really a smart city, and where everything is on time, and if it's not on time, you get a deduction on your life. I mean, like everything, every little thing is tracked, and it's all about this guy called the Harlequin, who is just running around and just causing trouble everywhere he goes. He's dropping jelly beans so it stops a train. I mean, he's not trying to hurt anybody, but he's just making a ruckus of some kind to fuck with this finely tuned machine of a city and society. And I think it tells the morality tale of just, there's efficiency that's a good thing. And then there's an efficiency that when, again, just like we were talking about, how when it starts to cross over into the consumer space, oh, wait a minute, it might sound hyperbolic, but I think we forget what it is to be human, at a certain point. There's a certain degree of, what's the term I'm looking for? I don't know, just guesswork, or randomness. There's all these different things that make life kind of beautiful. And if everything just gets honed down to that point, to where you could split atoms with the timekeeping, I'm terrified of that. I don't know. What do you have any thoughts on that, Daniel?
No, I don't think that it will ever get. I don't know if never, but I don't. Certainly not in our lifetimes we'll ever get to that stage where everything is so kind
of hyper tracked.
That everything is kind of connected, whether it's from autonomous vehicles to all of the utilities and the walk light signs and all of that stuff. You can see certain elements of them. I don't think I will ever see a city that's actually to the degree that the science fiction story is telling. But it's one of those things where you're like, when it seems to be that there is a new business model out there of data as a service, and collecting data, and what are you doing with that data, and how do you monetize that data? And obviously you need to have a certain amount of you need to have a certain amount of application for that data, so that you will be able to sell it to someone else. But then again, you also need to have a certain application for that thing that you're selling, so as to incentivize the people from whom you're collecting the data, right? It kind of goes both ways. Like the data as a service, the data mart or whatever, that's kind of in the middle. They're not creating the data. They're not, they're just collecting the data, which is coming in from sort of the left side of the spectrum, and selling it to, people on the right side of the spectrum. But they need to still somehow monetize that. And the monetization of it is understanding what is the incentive for the people who produce the data, and B, what is the need from the people who collect the data. And it's one of those things where it's like an industry that has never existed before, because you never had the possibility to collect that data. Sorry, there's slight announcements in the background. Anyway, so I just find it interesting that the more sort of IBM or whoever gets, even like big construction manufacturing companies that start veering off into the data as a service space, where else could they see this becoming useful through monetization or whatever? And I'm afraid that it would be things along the lines of like, actually, what we have right now is, I don't know what the stats are, but they say how like there's several hundred CCTV cameras that are capturing a typical Londoner every single day. I don't know what it is in Boston, but I'm sure it's not that far off. And it's all good and well that you're on some kind of tape somewhere in someone's security basement. It's something completely different once you can get unstructured data into a position where you can do something meaningful out of it, because now you're no longer just on a tape that if you happen to pick out that tape, you can view that person walking in there. Now you actually know, and you're in a database, and that's the tracking aspect of it that is really scary. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just curious to see kind of like where it's going to take us, and how quickly are we going to get to that position.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a couple of very interesting points. One in particular is that, for a lot of people, like, okay, fine, like we're losing privacy, okay, but the real problem, for some people, the argument goes, and I understand this argument and can somewhat appreciate it. The real argument isn't that we've lost privacy. The argument is that loss of privacy can be used against us. As to where if this data couldn't be used in a court of law, or if that CCTV footage can't be used in a court of law, well, then who gives a shit, right? Like, or that's how some people feel, and I understand that. But on the flip side, I guess maybe on the hopeful side of this, it's interesting, like with the Equifax hack that happened. If companies can get held up, if they can get made accountable for the data that they collect, and there are repercussions for them doing that, then maybe there can be some pushback on this. I've mentioned the term a lot of times on the show, data minimization. And what's happening is a lot of smaller companies particularly are realizing, oh, wait a minute, I'm on the hook for this user data. This isn't good. Like, I could go to, because not every company can survive what Equifax, went through, and they know this. And so they're getting to the point to where they're going to do either one of two things. They're not going to collect the information, or they're going to start encrypting it client side, which, both of those are totally valid things to do. And my hope is, especially since, like, there was that story that was going around that the IRS, even after the Equifax hack, the IRS was going to hire Equifax to handle security for taxpayer data. It ended up that the IRS, like a week later, said, "Oh, no, you're not. We're not taking Equifax," and they gave it to Experian or whatever to actually do it. Not to say that that's necessarily better, but that was a case where I think the public outcry was just so huge, they had no choice but to, like, it was showing the sham for the entire, showing the sham that the entire system is. And I think they were scared to death that if they went forward, I think the IRS was going to be perfectly fine with, giving it to, giving this taxpayer data collection to whatever the company, the name just escaped me. Equifax, Jesus. But I think they would have kept it on, but just the public outcry was so crazy. So if this kind of concern and outcry can continue to happen, where when these hacks occur, maybe the tide can start to turn where companies start saying, oh shit, we don't want to be on the hook for this data anymore. We just don't want to do it. Because there's real repercussions, and Equifax is feeling that now, and not just from the public side, but also not just from the side of your everyday individual, but from the side of the government as well. Amazingly, of all things, hopefully there's hope. I'm not counting on it, but we'll see. What happens with that. But the other thing again is like, how does this stuff get used against me in the court of law? And sooner or later, it's going to get so crazy. I think people are going to start raising a stink about that too. So again, another area where I'm a little bit hopeful. Any last thoughts, Daniel?
No, took enough of your time. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, man. So let's see. Let's see what's going on in the chat here. Good question. Yep. Yeah. Daniel always has good questions. Let's see. I think the consensus in the Facebook group was that it wasn't a bad idea, but skeptical of IBM's implementation of it. And that's referencing the kind of the tracking of the food waste and all of that. That was right. And why trust IBM? Like, there's no good reason to trust IBM with fucking anything. That's a fact. So sure, understood. Anyway, I think we've got someone else lined up in the Hangout to come on, either audio or video, their choice. I've got Jacob. Jacob, are you ready to come on board?
Yeah. Woo!
Hey, there he is. Woo! Right on, baby. What's going on, Jacob?
Not a lot. It's good to be back on the Hangout. It's been a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally we got this back on weekends. Just because again, my schedule is starting to actually lighten up a little bit. So, which is nice. But what do you got? What do you got to ask about today, Jacob?
Well, I've got some, might be a bit of wild speculation, but it ties into some legitimate stuff. But I just want to put that out there. I don't necessarily believe what I'm about to put forward. Have you heard of the Count of Saint Germain?
Saint Germain. Isn't this like one of the guys that supposedly ascended or like lives forever?
Yeah. He was, he was a real person, but
right. But his identity, don't a lot of people wonder about his identity?
Yeah. So he was basically thought by some people to be an ascended master, like you were saying, immortal perhaps. There were reports of sightings of him throughout the 19th century and even into the early 20th century. I heard about this guy several years ago. I came across him, and recently I heard a podcast that they devoted to him. It's one of these UFO conspiracy type podcasts that they they dig into. They don't take real gullible view. They though they do tend to believe some of this stuff.
Right.
His long life got me thinking, or his supposed long life. In the Bible, early Old Testament, you've got people saying that they lived for hundreds of years. Methuselah was what, like 900 something. You
936.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, a bunch of them. Enoch lived to be 300. Adam alone lived to be 800 something, 820, something like that. So sure.
And you're probably aware of this list of Sumerian kings who were reported to be living, like, some of them thousands of years.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, like I said, I definitely don't buy into the thousands of years, reign of a Sumerian king. But got me thinking. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on the possibility of certain people in the past possibly having lived than people generally live today? 150, maybe even longer.
So humans living like exceptionally longer times in the past.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily see any evidence for it. Like I said, this is just wild speculation.
Sure.
I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and if that maybe could be a pathway into studying solutions for life extension.
Well, it's interesting. I did get, and I don't think, no, it wasn't from you, but someone else earlier asked, because I got some preloaded questions for the show today, just in case. And other people asked about life extension as well. So good. I get to kill, I don't want to kill a bird, but you get to knock them with two stones, or however that's supposed to go. Fuck it. So as far as my thoughts on this, now the interesting thing is that, the list of Sumerian kings and the ones that lived for like thousands of years, theoretically, now the argument there, like you said, you don't buy into the idea that anybody was living for thousands of years. The argument there by some, including Zechariah Sitchin, who I had the pleasure of knowing, even though I don't agree with a lot of his conclusions that he had. His argument was that those were actually the Anunnaki, like those were aliens, or they were hybrid creatures that human / Anunnaki hybrids that were able to live for this really long time. In fact, at the end of his life, he was. This is where the concept of demigods comes from. At the end of his life, he was trying to raise funds. I actually donated to this. Even though, like I said, I don't buy into aliens. I don't buy into any of that stuff. But I do appreciate, and I think he's done some genuinely great archaeological and anthropological work. But he was trying. I'm trying to think of the name. It's Pinnuabi. I could be pronouncing that wrong, but this was kind of the last daughter who we actually have the skeleton of. We in Iraq there's a museum where she's Pinnuabi's there, and she's part of this list that comes down of these kings and gods. And the idea that he wanted to get DNA testing done on this woman, on this ancient, on the sarcophagus, whatever, and on the bones themselves, because he wanted to find out. His speculation was that she would have kind of in her DNA would have the key effectively to whatever long lasting life is, because his argument is that the gods, or the Anunnaki in his case, these aliens, gave us two things. One is knowledge, the other was long life, but at some point, which matches with the biblical story, they had to take that long life away. And that when you get into the concept of the flood, right? Even after the flood, though, you still have people that are living, like Abraham lived to be 120, whatever. I mean, again, you'd have to accept the Bible as history, which I don't exactly do that. So, but it's fascinating that, there's some people who have actually tried to prove that humans or something on this earth did live exceptionally long lives. Now, another important point to bring up with that, I think, is that in Christianity, if you take the Bible at face value, with Christianity, and you don't try to like really interpret too much. You just take it at face value. The argument would go that humans have been de-evolving for thousands of years, not getting smarter, not getting better, not evolving, but actually de-evolving from a purer state, something closer to Adam and Eve, or whatever. And that's not even getting into Genesis 6:4, where, suddenly you start talking about these creatures called the Nephilim. But in any case, also ironically, kind of the paleo community, which is not exactly like a hard science, but I mean, they base what they have to say on a lot of work done by genuine researchers and scientists. But in the paleo community, that's a similar argument that like Rob Wolf brings up, is that we are significantly we are lesser beings, shall we say, than, our Paleolithic ancestors. That's not getting into aliens or gods or anything. That's just straight up his argument that we're weaker, we're not as smart, we're not as in tune. The only problem where that kind of falls apart is that a lot of the paleo community also argues, though, that no human being was meant to live longer than like 35. And that falls into genetic determinism, where pretty much once you have a kid and you raise the kid to the point where the kid can take care of itself, nature doesn't give a shit about you anymore. And, you can just die, like you're done. And that's why you end up with diseases and all this stuff later on in life, because you were never meant to live that long. So that would, like, genetic determinism, that interpretation, that hard line on genetic determinism would stand against the theory that at some point humans could live or may have lived longer, or that certain people could have lived longer, or something like this, because the idea goes is that you evolved to do only one thing: pass on your DNA, and then you die. And you don't need 100 or 200 or 300 or 1,000 years to be able to do that. But with that in mind, humans are replete, not unlike X-Men, with mutations. I mean, that happen often. You have there's people that don't require sleep, but they're relatively healthy.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, I don't necessarily think if these people theoretically existed that it would have been across the whole population of humans. It might have been a mutation here and there.
Sure. And frankly, I don't see any reason why that couldn't happen. And you have precedent within nature to where certain creatures can live that long. You have the Greenland shark, which we know can live for literal hundreds of years. There's sharks alive right now that could have encountered, the pilgrim boats coming over from, from Europe, way, 400 years ago, or whatever. I mean, that's a fact. So, and also when you get into, and I've brought this up on the show many times, but I mean, when you get into the works of Aubrey de Grey, the people that are really working on life extension, he makes it very clear that there's actually no real scientific reason. I mean, outside of like genetic determinism, but that's more of a reasoning and not exactly like a scientific reason. There's no real reason why humans should die. Like why, it just doesn't make any sense. There's something that's switched off, which is funny because I remember when I first read his book Ending Aging, and he was talking about that. And understand, Aubrey de Grey, for those listening, Aubrey de Grey is considered, just the master of his field. I mean, this isn't some woo-woo crackpot guy at all. He's really doing the business. But it's funny because I felt like when I was reading him, all I could think about was Sitchin the whole time, where Sitchin is saying, yeah, but that ability to live forever, whatever that was in the DNA that allowed for it, was just stripped from us, and because that sounds like what he was saying. He's like, look, everything's here for us to live a really long time. Why aren't we? It doesn't make any goddamn sense. And it did make me think of that, admittedly, but back to the mutant thing. Yes, I'm totally open to the idea that there are humans that could have lived, for centuries, for very, very long periods of time. I am open to the idea that there might have been a sweet spot where humanity, where certain humans were still eating right and living a very active lifestyle, doing all the healthy stuff, kind of like what the paleo people talk about, but hadn't run into the stressors that come with a lot of more modern civilization or even more modern ancient civilization. And they could have ended up living a significantly longer time. I mean, in my own life, I've, this is anecdote, but I've met women who were well into their 60s, and I'm not kidding. I thought they were in their 30s. Like, I'm not just saying that to be nice to them or something, or because I wanted to snoop them or whatever. I mean, like, literally, they looked like they were in their 30s, and they just lived a fantastic lifestyle, and they ate very well. Admittedly, they were vegan, but whatever. I mean, it was working for them. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible that those kind of people existed, kind of. I mean, it's not a Highlander situation where it's some kind of separate race from us that are doing it, but yeah, there could have been effectively some Duncan MacLeods going around. I don't know. What do you think, Jacob? What do you got on that?
Well, like I said, I have no evidence for this assertion. It was just a thought experiment that was triggered when I heard that podcast, and just kind of, I just thought, there's these accounts of different people throughout history living unnaturally long lives, and just thought the thought experiment of, what if there were, what would the implications be for actual, life extension projects today.
Sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, well, that's certainly.
I mean, I think it's a path of investigation that, I didn't know that Sitchin. I haven't read Sitchin. I know a little bit about him. Because I've heard of the Anunnaki and some of these things, but I didn't know about this skeleton you're talking about that he was trying to get funding to test. Or his theory of ability to live long being stripped of our DNA. I'd never heard of that, but I don't know. I just think it's a interesting thought experiment, and something that someone might want to investigate for extension purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I don't see why it couldn't happen. I mean, there's plenty of good reasons. Like, I imagine if you really sat down, I mean, Aubrey de Grey kind of admitted it himself, but I mean, if you sat down with a doctor or something, I'm sure they would say, oh yeah, well, if this happened, then it could work out. I mean, yeah, that could be a really huge subject, but I agree. I think it's a fascinating question. I appreciate it. I like that. I like that way of thinking a lot, and I'm totally open that. Well, I'll just say it. I'll put out the crazy. Yeah, there could be somebody walking around right now that's been around for 500 years. Who's to say? I mean, like, it's certainly I think it's within the realm of possibility based upon what I know. But yeah, who knows? And I would love to see a lot more research into that. In fact, I'm curious. I've never really heard, and I've actually great friends who are in the life extension field. That in fact, I even asked one of them to be on Sovryn Tech, and he's like, oh no, he says, I'm scared to death. I would just say something wrong, and it would like fuck with the whole industry or something. But anyway, I've talked with these guys about a lot of this stuff. I mean, and I think they would be amenable to the idea too. But I've never really heard them discuss, like, looking into those kind of historical examples other than Methuselah. Everybody, because like that's one of the life extension companies out there right now.
Yeah, like the Methuselah Foundation isn't
right. Yeah, which Aubrey de Grey.
But I don't think. Yeah, but I don't think, from what I know, I don't think they've ever actually looked at possible historical examples of it. It was more of the the mythological nature of Methuselah that they were referencing.
It's a pity. Like, in fact, here's a conspiracy that I'll lay down, that I was shocked. There was one episode of Ancient Aliens that talked about, I'll talk about this because this is kind of behind a paywall, so I feel a little more comfortable about it. So when I was in Baghdad, there's museums, and beautiful museums in Baghdad. Well, they were beautiful. Maybe they're beautiful again. I don't know. But these museums during when the United States Army was invading Baghdad, these museums were ransacked. Now, the argument goes is that it was the Iraqis themselves, it was just some, locals that were doing the ransacking and trying to take, a lot of precious, artifacts and whatever else from it. And understand that, like, Iraq, is as much next to Israel and, maybe a couple other countries, is like as much the center of history of everything that happens within, that we have a recorded history as anywhere else. And so, these are literally priceless, multi-thousands of years old, talking to the very beginning of any kind of human civilization sort of stuff that we have there, just like kind of like Pinduabe is also, there as well. And I remember talking to, and this isn't like classified shit or anything, but I remember talking to, some of the local people there, and, I was saying like who did this? And they were saying that it was United States military guys that did the ransacking of these museums. Now, there's a part of me, and in fact, I was amazed by this, and at some point we could, maybe Stephanie could be on because she can confirm this part of it. There were like a couple seasons ago on Ancient Aliens. Now, I watched that show just for the laughs. I don't take everything they say very seriously. Because again, I don't buy into the whole idea that aliens have been here. But at the beginning of an episode, and I think it was in season 10, they brought up the fact, they said, oh yeah, it's like, there was all this evidence that existed within these Iraqi museums, and that's all gone now because of the Iraqi invasion. And Stephanie just like looked at me and she was like, what? Because I never heard anybody else besides me talk about this. I only knew because I talked to actual Iraqis about it, right? And she, before I even said anything, she just turned to me because, she knew what I had told her about when I was over there. And it's crazy. I can't help but feel to some degree that there is, sometimes I wonder, and actually this isn't conspiracy. There are genuine people who, there have been Christians, there have been all kinds of groups over the past 100, 200, or who knows, however long they've been around, who have been trying to hide parts of humanity's past. If it's because you can't, Christians can't accept the fact that Romans made a statue with with a goat sucking a guy's dick, and that's absolutely true. That they put it off in some secret room in an Italian museum or something. They don't want anybody to know that exists. If it's hiding it like that, or if it's hiding, who knows what was in our history? Who knows what's? I mean, there's times where it can feel like a cover up, and again, speculation.
Secret Vatican archives.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I'm speculating, I'm kind of putting that out there, but it's weird that none of these life extension guys, I mean, you're bringing up a brilliant point, Jacob. Like, why aren't they looking into the history of this stuff? And like I said, I've talked to the guys that are knee deep in this field, and I've never really heard them talk about it. And it's weird that, well, why not let Sitchin do what he wants to do? Get the DNA from Pinduabe and let's do this. Just put his, that way, if you think he's such a mockery, if you think what Sitchin's theories are so much bullshit, which they actually end up getting proven more and more, even though, like I said, I don't agree with all of his conclusions, especially when it comes to aliens, then just prove him wrong. Just say, hey, yeah, I mean, we've the United States has that, multi-million-dollar fucking embassy there. Send somebody from that embassy, go get the DNA, do the business, and then, yeah, Sitchin, you're all wrong. But no, instead, the guy dies before he can finish it. This would be back in fact, almost, well, we're celebrating like 7 years since he died. It was October of 2010. I was actually invited to the funeral. It's kind of crazy. I mean, I think looking into the historical aspects is a very valid thing to do. I think it's a very worthwhile thing to do, to see what we can find about that. But I don't know, maybe I'll whisper in some ears, or if anybody listening to the sound of our voices, has any sway in those fields, I'd recommend looking into it and check out Sitchin's work on this stuff. So anyway, great stuff to bring up. Jacob, you got anything else? Or if you have any comments on that.
I always could, but this has been a good conversation, so I think I'll just leave it there for today.
Sure. So
Carpe
cool.
Lucem.
You got it. Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Great as always. Always awesome questions coming from that. I love getting into, this is the thing. As long as you separate, you make it clear when you're separating speculation from, or you make it clear that that something's speculation and something's fact. I think going into the realm of speculation is a totally valid and wonderful thing to do. And that's where a lot of the great ideas that create some kind of, something in reality really comes from. So speculation is so important. I really love digging into that. So let's see, anything else going on in the live chat? Nothing yet. So I am going to go to the we'll go to the Facebook group here and talk about that and see what they have listed off as far as these preloaded questions. Thoughts on life extension technology in medicine? Yeah, so we got into that a bit. I will say again, and my opinion really hasn't changed on this over the years. One of the very important areas to concentrate on with life extension is cryonics, is in freezing people, because then that allows you to, once you can freeze people and bring them back, like that allows you to kind of figure out, okay, well, that buys us time, right, to keep figuring out these new ways that we could do life extension. Yeah. And as far as cryonics go, I mean, there isn't any real new reports out of that field. There hasn't been anything new for a while. I mean, what's the company, Alcor or whatever, they're doing tremendous work. More of those companies need to exist, in my opinion, where when you die, like you're wearing this little bracelet or something, when you die, they will, they'll send a helicopter out right away and they'll get you frozen as soon as possible. Those kinds of things are so important. Otherwise, really the most exciting news that has come out of life extension in general is something that I mentioned earlier, where they did discover Greenland sharks that are literally living 400 years. I mean, and every life extension scientist, ears definitely went up saying, whoa, what do they got? How is that possible? So maybe something will end up coming out of that. So, okay, let's see. What else do we have here? Do you think it is possible for some anarchist section of humanity to climb the Kardashev scale? I'll explain what that is in a second. Without resorting to widespread coercion, i.e. statism, along the way? Is the goal futile and thus the musings irrelevant, at least for the time being? Okay, so the Kardashev scale, this is this idea that there are three types, well, I guess technically four, but there's three types of civilizations, okay? And it's named after, is it Nikolai Kardashev, who was a very famous Russian cosmologist. And the idea is that a type 1 civilization is the civilization that is able to harness like all the energy that their planet that they live on collects from the local star, okay? A type 2 civilization would be one that actually collects all the energy from its local star. And this is probably the most popular idea. This would be, in fact, if you remember the Star Trek The Next Generation episode from season 6, I believe is called Relics with Scotty, where they find a Dyson sphere, where it's this literal, device contraption. It's this massive structure that surrounds this solar system's it surrounds the entire solar system and collects all, like a giant solar collector. It collects all of the energy from the sun within the Dyson sphere. That would be a type 2 civilization. And then you have a type 3 civilization, which is this idea that you could actually harness all of the energy within your galaxy, not just within a solar system, within a galaxy. Now, to understand, humanity today, we're not even type 1. Okay, we're not even close. I mean, maybe we could turn the Earth into a giant, solar cell or something, and then we'd be considered type 1. It's even tough. Like, when do you even hit type 1? Like, what does that even mean? Type 2, you have very, very basic, understandings of what that could look like I said, with the Dyson sphere. Type 3, holy fuck, I can't even imagine. But, so anyway, getting up the Kardashev scale, how do we get to type 1, type 2, type 3? If we are anarchists, if it's a group of anarchists, without somehow resorting to widespread coercion, especially and I think this is kind of a cool question, because so you would think with type 2, you are, say you have a Dyson sphere, like everybody sort of has to agree to that, right? to build a Dyson sphere, everybody has to agree that, okay, yeah, you can cover this entire planet, or you can cover this entire solar system. And like, if you remember in the episode that I mentioned, The Next Generation with Relics, like the Enterprise had to fly into like these doors, and it was going to explode. I think the Dyson sphere was going to self-destruct or whatever. It was failing. And they couldn't get out of it, And so that's a problem. Donald Trump, you want to talk about a huge wall. I mean, the Dyson sphere's got nothing on anything in Donald Trump's imagination. Of course, he doesn't have much in his imagination either. But well, anyway, that's a side point. I think that, yeah, I don't know that you could get there, because at the same time, without some kind of statism, without some kind of like socialist, a certain mindset. Yeah, somebody in the live chat just said the star inside was dying, I think. Yeah, maybe that's what it was. So anyway, yeah, I'm not sure how, like, I can't even imagine. Yeah, I mean, just even like the way that the free market, say you're, say the type of anarchism, say it's more of a free market anarchism. Okay. Like, how does the market come to the idea that, oh yeah, we're going to close off the entire solar system? Like, who the fuck would agree to that? Like that just wouldn't, that wouldn't happen. Not to say that a Dyson sphere has to be completely enclosed, but I don't know. The Kardashev scale, its utility is kind of questionable. It's right up there with a lot of these ideas, like the Great Filter, where why aren't we detecting alien life and all this? Is it because the only thing that can transcend its solar system is AI? I mean, and the Great Filter means that you really can't become like a galactic civilization, because you'll just end up all nuking yourselves. I mean, it's kind of in line with these things. So I don't know how much faith even to put into the Kardashev scale, from the get-go. Okay. So yeah, I really can't picture that. I can't picture becoming a type 2 civilization. Like, humans just don't work that way. I just really don't think humans work that way. I mean, like, the market works not because everybody agrees on what they want, but it's kind of like the old Adam Smith invisible hand kind of thing, where the idea is that, well, that's the beauty of the market, is that somebody doing something that means something to them but means nothing to you by default, and various interconnectivity actually ends up meaning something to you. It's like Leonard Reed's iPencil, and I just don't know how that, like, how there would be a unifying idea that, yep, we're going to go type 2. We're going to do that. Or even type 1. Well, type 1 maybe, because at least then you have access to other planetoids and everything. But yeah, we're getting into definite, like, major hypothetical realms with a lot of that. So let's move on to another one here. But yeah, no, I just don't see humanity, like I've said all the time, I don't see the Earth ever being completely populated by anarchists. Not in relevant numbers, not where everybody is just like, oh yeah, every human being's just going to be an anarchist. I really don't see that happening. Here we go. Let's see. If science/technology gave you the option of temporarily experiencing life as a woman, as immersive as you could possibly imagine, some kind of brain machine interface VR, would you give it a whirl? Yes, I would. But I would be so particular if, like, I'm supposed to experience everything. Now, if it's VR and I have total control of the person that, say, is going to fuck me, in my new body parts, then that's fine, because I could program the person however I want, and into certain, genteel, being very, whatever. I don't know. I'd probably want them to be gentle at first, but like, if it was just, oh, can I switch? And then the only thing I had to interact with another physical person, not just some program. I would be so super particular as to what guy I would allow to, make me experience what it's like to be a woman. But I'm totally on board with that. In fact, I was amazed that, and I don't know if there's any real statistics out there about this, but with virtual reality, they already have the videos where or like the software, the programs that allow you to choose, okay, do you want to experience a sex scene as a man or a woman, regardless of what your personal gender is? And like, even Leo Laporte of This Week in Tech, he chose a woman. He's like, I want to know what it's like I want to go through the VR experience of being a woman. And it turned out most people chose, they were anonymous in who got to do it. Just Leo Laporte, admitted it. But most people chose, what is it like to be a woman? And unfortunately, there's just a ton of guys, around this fucking headset to try this out. But regardless, most of them wanted to see what it was like. So, that's good. That's a good sign that people are maybe building up some degree of empathy for, wanting to understand, what people with certain biological differences, part differences, whatever, have. I think that's cool. Yeah, I wouldn't mind knowing, but at the same time, I so enjoy here's the thing, is that changing some of these parts, you don't know what the effect is upon the human being. Like, how much does that change what the human being does? I mean, for guys, it's no small order the fact that your dick is constantly brushing against something in your pants, whatever. I mean, it just is. I'm not saying he's brushing against people. I'm saying it's just brushing against some kind of material or something like that. I mean, it's always kind of happening. That has an effect on your brain, whether you want to admit to it or not. So, once you start losing that effect, I mean, is that the same person? This raises huge questions. When you start, it's not, I really don't think it's just as simple as changing genders and then, experiencing what it's like to be a woman. And then you have that experience as in you being you. I don't know that it necessarily works that way. I feel, I'm not like some finely tuned machine, like some great athlete or something, but I'm so aware of me and my body and what I do. I generally don't want to change it that much, but I am, as long as the scenario could exist, where at least I could go back to me, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. I want to know. I want to know what it's like to get it on like a lady. Let's see. We may have KIC 8462. What I don't get. Let's see. Oh, is that KIC 8462852? Is that Dyson sphere, or that's that funny solar system that we keep looking at, that we can't really explain what's going on there, and people think it might be a sign of alien life. And one theory is that it's actually the reason why the light from that star is so weird is because it's a Dyson sphere. So let's see. It says here in the live chat, what I don't get. Yeah, okay, I was right. That's what it was. Okay, what I don't get about Dyson spheres is you get enough materials to build the thing. Is there even enough in our solar system to build something like that? Yeah, I heavily debate that. Right, I agree with that point. Like, do we even have the materials to do it? Like, I don't even know how that happens. That it's a huge deal. That's a big ask. I mean, I can't imagine. Yeah. Anyway, that's getting into realms that I think are impractical. It's exciting. I love to talk about it. I mean, and I'm all about the big science fiction. But anyway, let's see here. This is another one. Or how about actual physical change, a la The Culture, where you can change anytime you want? Yeah. So the Culture series talk about big science fiction, post-scarcity science fiction, from Ian M. Banks, one of my favorite series, and it's like one of the rare cases of anarchist books that are bestsellers with the Culture series. Yeah, so in that, humans are advanced enough to where, and there's an admixture with AI, but humans are advanced enough to where they can just change their genders, kind of willy-nilly. And yeah. I mean, also the Culture, as in the heroes of these stories, they are incredibly advanced humans socially. I mean, like that, like they've got it. They're all anarchists, or the bulk of them are anarchists anyway, minus some villains here and there. But, yeah, they have a very specific mindset, to where that could be a thing. And, I'm game for it. Like, yeah, I would like to have that experience. So, but I'd also like to be able to come back to me, or at least have the option. Who knows? Maybe I'll love it. Maybe I'd love being a woman, maybe being a woman. Well, it might not even be a maybe. Being a woman's better, as long as they're not getting, trashed on and abused and whatever else by, most of the guys on planet Earth. I could imagine it being like, really, you wouldn't want to have tits. I forget what the movie was, and I forget the actor that was in it. It was in the guy that was one of the Belushis, because it's the same guy that was in Red Heat, where he woke up one morning as a woman, and like the first thing he's doing is he's like groping himself. And I get the feminist concerns around that and everything, but admittedly, like, yeah, I think it'd be nice to know what it'd be like to have a pair of tits. Holy shit, that'd be awesome. So anyway, let's see. Here's a next one. It's not a question as much as an observation. Memory foam is like screwing in quicksand. Comfy, but no spring back. I guess we'll improvise. Yeah, memory foam can be kind of weird. Gotta agree with you on that one. That can be kind of interesting. This is where headboards and posts are so helpful, because then you've got something to work off of. Let's see. Next one is, how risky is it? And we got to wrap this up here in a minute because it's we only do this for about an hour and we're approaching the hour. How risky is it really to store crypto on an exchange wallet such as Bittrex, at least until I figure out what is wrong with my computer/wallet? I don't want to lose my money. Well, it's kind of always a risk. I mean, it's always really a major risk. And the best thing you could do is mitigate that risk just by, does the exchange that you're holding it on, do they have a fair reputation? Like, look into what are the complaints. Have there been any crazy stories that have come out about a certain exchange? Bittrex has a fairly good reputation. So, I mean, I'll just put it this way. In the past, there have been certain exchanges. And I mean, look, an exchange could get shut down by a government. It might not even be an exchange that does something nefarious or whatever. So it's always a very serious risk. But yeah, I mean, there's been points where I've held money, fair amounts on exchanges for a few months. So, it's all, that's really all personal tolerance. That's a very subjective affair. So let's see. In the live chat, somebody says special circumstances wasn't always anarchist with all their meddling. Yeah, right. Exactly. That's referencing the Culture series. So, okay, let's get into another one. And what did you think of the Battlefront 2 beta? Are you happy with the progression system? Okay, so the Battlefront 2, this is Star Wars Battlefront 2. This will be the last question. It's a fun one. I like to end on a fun one. This ran for a few days. They actually extended the beta, not a surprise. I got into I had pre-ordered the Elite Trooper edition of Star Wars Battlefront 2. And the main reason I'm excited about this game isn't really even for the multiplayer, which is all you got to do with the beta. You didn't get to do any you could play single player, but you played against bots, but you didn't get to play the single player campaign with the beta. And that's the main thing that I want out of this. And look, I know someone's going to make a game movie out of it and put it up on YouTube, and then I could just watch it if that's all I want is the story. But no, ironically, playing off of, if you could experience being a woman, would you? Yeah, I want to be Iden Verso. Like, I think she's badass. Like, I want to experience that. I want to be, kind of hands-on and rocking and rolling. I think that's such a cool, worthy addition to this character, to the Star Wars universe, and very sexy. I mean, Janina Gavankar is just, holy shit. She's awesome. So yeah, I want to experience that. Anyway, so as far as the beta goes, and then we'll wrap this up. So as far as the game mechanics itself, I was very pleased. Like I ran around with Darth Maul, and then you could also choose to be, depending on how many points you collected, like experience points, for lack of a better phrase, that you collected because you could be Boba Fett. There were some other characters you could be, but one of the modes that you're able to test out in the beta, you could be either Darth Maul or you could be one of the battle droids. Being the battle droids was kind of fun. You could be one of the super battle droids as well. And there were some different classes, like there was a more sniper type of one of the battle droids and everything. That was kind of cool. So playing that, I like that. There's a lot of arguments going on right now about loot crates. And I don't mean like a physical company that sells loot crates where they kind of rip you off by sending you random things that, don't sell on some store shelf somewhere. And you think it's so cool because it's this geeky loot crate. Well, Piper's getting paid on that, but because it's such bullshit. But so in Battlefront 2 and in other games, they are doing this thing called loot, where if you show up during the day or if you meet certain objectives, whatever, you could end up with like some kind of random awesome thing, like a part for your starfighter or some kind of blaster or something like that. And yeah, I get it that there could be problems with that because it could really unbalance the game, or it could entice you to put down more money for in-app purchases, even though Battlefront 2 was making it very clear that they're getting rid of a lot of that kind of paying for DLC stuff and everything. Yeah, I don't know. Like I didn't really have any problem with it. Playing it, I thought it worked. I thought everything that I experienced in those few days felt very even. I didn't really have any concerns. Look, if there's people out there that can play for 15 hours a day. I mean, I was a teenager once. I could have pulled that off. Yeah, they should get rewarded for that, like that's, I don't really necessarily have an issue with that. So I get the concerns about unbalanced games and everything. But I don't know exactly what really to do about that. So that's the kind of like game, I'm a game developer, but that's the kind of game developing that I don't ever want to have to go there. Like I don't ever even really want to have to think about that. My level of multiplayer, I like Nidhogg, like that's very basic, rock and roll. So yeah, but I enjoyed it. What I played felt really good, felt really smooth. I mean, all the force powers and everything that you could do with Darth Maul, I thought that those were so cool. Someone in the live chat says the new single player trailer they put out this week looks really good. Also, another person said the latest trailer was awesome for Battlefront 2. Yeah, boy, I think he might be hinting at something there because he put ... was awesome for Battlefront 2. Because the trailer, I don't know about you. So, all right, well, first off, yes, the new Battlefront 2 trailer was amazing for the single player campaign. I mean, it was brilliant. So many people were saying, so when does this movie come out? When can I get tickets for this? Because it just looked like this is what we want out of Star Wars. It's amazing that, with so many of these video games, they do the storylines that people want, but for some reason, Lucasfilm will just never make that shit into something, be it an animated series or a story arc of some kind, whatever it is. I mean, they won't do it. So anyway, that looked amazing, and it has to do with, what is it, Operation Cinder or whatever it's called that they talked about in Shattered Empire. I think that the single player looks like it's in great hands, and somebody will make that game movie and it'll be awesome. Okay, but the trailer, what I was going to say a minute ago, the trailer for The Last Jedi, and I'm actually going to be recording a Star Wars update here in the next few days to release on Patreon. But the new trailer for The Last Jedi was not awesome. I was not, like, visually it was stunning. There's interesting stuff, but you know what the problem is like you were shown so much, but really you were shown nothing. Like at the same time, it told you absolutely nothing about what's going on. And there's so many clever editing tricks that they did. And there's a lot of arguments going on around these editing tricks that were done for The Last Jedi. Is that Rey going to the dark side at the end of it? What's going on? Was that Kylo, stretching out his hand and everything? And then there's arguments. Those are two completely different, two separate scenes. Who is Luke talking about when he says, I've only seen this kind of power once before? I mean, it's crazy. On Twitter, you get better answers. Like, at least Ryan Johnson came out and said, The Last Jedi title means Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is the Last Jedi, which I think says a whole hell of a lot about what's going to be going on in this movie, particularly with Rey and Kylo. But, man, yeah, visually stunning. I get it. But I really felt like I had no idea. I still have no idea what's going to be done in this film. And I think the film's going to be great, but it worries me a little bit, right? Because if you don't have enough confidence in what you're going to put out there in the story, I mean, you could say that there's some kind of crazy surprise hook. Look, I've seen the trailers for The Empire Strikes Back. Those told you what the fuck was going to happen in the movie without telling you about, the big hook with Darth Vader. And being Luke's dad. Like, you can do this. You can work around that. And so I'm a little concerned that they're worried people are going to flip out and be talking about it forever if they know even an ounce of the story, that they'll really be bothered by it. So yeah, I don't know. Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, and I know Kathleen Kennedy is a smart ass. I mean, she is a smart woman. She is smart as fuck. I'm losing confidence. I read the book, Certain Point of View. It took me almost all month to listen to this. And where normally I listen to a Star Wars book in a day, in like 5-6 hours, I listened to an entire Star Wars novel, not some junior novel, a full on Star Wars novel. This Certain Point of View book. Here, ready? Spoiler alerts, folks. Spoiler alerts. And I really got to wrap this up. Spoiler alerts. Tarkin is gay. That's fine. That's great. I love. Please, by all means, I think Tarkin being gay is a brilliant fucking idea. Okay, but it's just so I don't, like everything about the way that this whole book, certain point of view, like presented everything was so weird. I'll talk about it more in the Star Wars update. It's very, very strange. And like all of these things suddenly, you watch New Hope and you have to watch it with new eyes, but it's a ton of information that just kind of seems after, like you had a whole novel about Tarkin. Don't you think you should have mentioned in that he was gay? Why just do this stupid little book that has all these, oh man, I'm all for it. It's great. Yep. Tarkin's gay. Like I said, obviously I hope, my history with the show, shows I have no problem with that. I'm sure there's people up in arms like, oh, it's the gay agenda. I don't give a shit. I have to let the gay agenda run wild. Okay. Everything about that just seemed really off, really forced, no pun intended. Star Wars is not being handled. I'm really getting more of the sense that Star Wars is not being handled very well right now. As to where a year ago, I felt the exact opposite. I felt the absolute exact opposite about how Star Wars is being handled. Someone says in the live chat, if they are being overly deceptive in the trailer, that's BS. But as it is, I loved it and it looks awesome. Yeah, I mean, again, it looks awesome, but I really like they could have said something. Like, give us a little bit of story. I mean, I had to read that book, that Star Wars book, absolutely everything you need to know about Star Wars. That's part of the journey to the Last Jedi, to find out that even Snoke had Force powers. Like, fuck, could you give me something? To where it doesn't have to be some little blurb in this, ADD book. Let's see. Another person said, yeah, looking forward to talking about that in the Star Wars episode. A lot of red herrings. Yeah, absolutely. Next line is, I get the feeling that Kathleen Kennedy isn't in the driver's seat anymore. I think Bob Iger has taken a very strong hand in Lucasfilm. That's not a bad theory. I hadn't thought about that. And honestly, I see that as a bad thing because Bob Iger has a strong hand in Marvel. And I know the reviews for Thor Ragnarok are great, and I'm sure it's actually a great movie. But overall, we're talking about the entire franchise. What Marvel is doing at a franchise level, at a universe level, is boring. It's very boring. You're not getting characters dying. Here's an opportunity to, with fantastic things happening in the cinematic universe, in the Marvel cinematic universe, you could solve all of the terrible tropes that have been plaguing comic books for the past 20 to 30 years. And instead, they're just doubling down on them. Like the idea that, even if somebody dies, they come back in the next movie. Like that idiot from, was Agent Coulson or something, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. No, let the fucker die. Let it end. And so, if it's all going to be this completely safe, take no risks, and, take prisoners instead of take no prisoners attitude with Star Wars, man, that's boring. That's boring. And you know what? You know what it does, and someone just said I feel the same way in the live chat. I'm going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but really, Star Trek's better. I couldn't fucking believe that on Star Trek Discovery, like in the second or third episode, they killed off the security chief of the fucking. Not that that's new. I mean, in the Next Generation, in the first season, they killed off Tasha Yar, but they just, out of nowhere, they just killed this character. It's like, what? You're just like, holy fuck, that just happened. It's not safe. It's not safe. And this was a problem that Star Wars knew about 20 years ago when Vector Prime came out, when they did the new Jedi Order. This was a problem they knew about because that's why they killed off Chewbacca. Now that's not canon anymore, and I understand. And it ended up being bullshit anyway because Chewbacca did it to save young or was it Anakin? Yeah, it was, or Ben Skywalker, whatever, whichever one he saved. And then that character died off. And it's like, well, then there's no point to Chewbacca's death, you dipshits. But they knew then that Star Wars is playing it way too safe, and we need to do something in the expanded universe. Again, this is back in the 90s. We need to do something or maybe it's the early aughts. We need to do something in the expanded universe to make it dangerous again and get people excited again. And so they killed off Chewbacca. I'm not saying that was a great idea, but the abstract notion that Star Wars was safe, they're right. That was a problem. And if we're just going to go into that realm with what Disney's doing, fuck it. Why reboot the canon? Why bother? Why fucking bother? It's just, give me something. Give me something visceral. That's what we love. That's what we really love in Star Wars. I mean, like when Yoda died in Return of the Jedi, that's still huge. In fact, in that book, A Certain Point of View, when they get to Yoda's story, that was one of the best parts of the book, because Yoda, like, your time is limited with this character, and that's a precious and beautiful thing. And so, the story has more meaning to it. There's a reason. It's not just like to be badass sake. You don't want to play it safe in your universes and your sandboxes, because that's how you get the great feelings, the great emotions. That's how you explore all these possibilities, and that's how you tell great stories. Being safe, oh yeah, I get to see another Marvel movie. Oh, I get to see another Marvel movie. Nobody's going to die. Oh yeah, that character will be back. Oh, I get to see another Marvel movie. I mean, it's fucking boring, So anyway, and then somebody just said, seriously, I'm so close to admitting Star Trek is better than Star Wars. Right on, baby. And, I never thought that I would say that. I really never thought that I would say that, because I've held up Star Wars for so long. But yeah, times have changed. And another person says, yeah, Marvel completely squandered Yoda in the Star Wars comic. Yeah, that too. That was a botch. That was a botch job. Anyway, all right, we got to wrap this up. I really do need to wrap this up. A lot of shit going on, so just put it that way. Thank you so much to everybody that attended. Thank you for everybody that was a part of it. Thank you for everybody in the live chat, Jacob and Daniel that were in the Hangout. That was awesome to hear from you. Great subjects to bring up, wild stuff to talk about. We'll be back doing the live Hangout we'll have a November edition. That'll come up in pretty short order. November, I'm hoping, will be an exciting month. I don't want to make any promises, but October, I got a bunch of stuff that's still to release this month, even though we're approaching the end of it. But of course, you'll get your Wednesday Q&A as always. There will be another dynamite. I hope people enjoyed this week's Sovryn Tech. A lot of interesting subjects I wanted to bring up in that, but got another dynamite Sovryn Tech lined up. There'll be a new Sex and Science Hour, and a few surprises that will, like I said, will be coming out throughout October, particularly for the patrons. Thanks, Brian. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Likewise to everybody else, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And hey, Star Trek Discovery's on in like 3 hours, baby. Let's do this. I'm going for it. So I will see all of you on the other side.